Hi, welcome to dev.log. I'm Dominic Giruso. This is the start of a series where you will follow me develop my web app. Before I go into the log, I just want to state that I'm constantly learning and definitely going to make mistakes throughout my path of making this app. Kind of have already, but feel free to let me know if I am doing something wrong or could be doing something better, because honestly, I'm figuring out this as I go. Now back to information about the series. I'm gonna try and get these videos up about once a week, and they'll be wherever I am in the process. You can view these videos as a snapshot of what I've done, what I've learned, and what I'm planning to do next. I want to note that these videos are not meant to be editing masterpieces. For me to do these basic logs and still have enough time to focus on development, they are going to be basic. Some weeks I might have more work done than others. So that's the general concept of the series. Also, if you enjoy this video, I would appreciate you leaving a like. And if you want to keep up with the series, then you should subscribe. Okay, now that all that information's out of the way, let's get into this log. The web app I'm developing is going to be a travel planning app. The goal of the app is to allow people to plan their own trips by themselves or with friends. The rough idea is that you can create a project, and in that project, there'll be different sections for different parts of planning the trip. So there'll be a section for transportation, hotels, attractions, etc. Now, at this point, all that info isn't fully worked out yet, but it will be. Not to mention that the current plan is that the app will be a live document. So you can think of it as a Google Docs where you can share it with your friends or anyone else, and they can join in and work on it at the same time. So you will be able to share again with your friends, and then you can work on planning the trip together, because we've all, I think, been there where, we're again working out on a trip, even if it's a small trip, and one friend's like, well, I want to go here, and another friend's like, well, I want to go here, and then you need to kind of work those situations out, as well as plenty of other situations. So hopefully that's the goal of this app, is to make that easier. At this current stage in the project, I am setting up the development infrastructure so that down the line there isn't a need for me to set up big pieces of the development process. That then leads me into the tech stack for this app. The plan is for the front end of the app to use the Next.js framework. Now, I know it technically can also work as the back end as well, but my plan is to keep that separate and have a dedicated back end. And then with the front end as well, I will be using Tailwind CSS to help design it. Moving on to the next part of the stack, the backend will use a Node.js based server that will be using the Nest.js framework. Then paired with that, for the database and other possible needs, I will be using Firebase. The parts I know I will need for sure from Firebase will be Firestore and their authentication services. Also down the line, I know I will need to choose what provider or host for the backend server. So, AWS or Google Cloud or Azure. Now, I also want to note that for both the front and back end, I will be using TypeScript rather than the usual vanilla JavaScript. The last part of the stack that I have classified as miscellaneous is the use of Docker that would be running the containers. I also know I might need Kubernetes down the line if needed, since I'm using Docker, but that I'm not for sure yet on. Starting off, I've kind of covered the first part of what I've done, that being the tech stack section. The next part that I worked on so far on the project has been the file layout for the project. Honestly, this was one part that gave me the most headache so far. I first thought that it might be good to maybe try and keep both the front and back end in the same repo, since it was only me developing the project. But then later on, I ran into some errors with that, and could see how down the line it could cause even more problems. So I decided to keep them as two separate repos. After some time, and with me going to work on other things for the project, like set up the actual project themselves, the current situation of the file layout looks like this, though as all things that might change. I also have the Docker Composer YAML that I don't know if I will need or not. I just left it in there as well. Moving on with the next part of what I did this week, I worked on setting up the project's repo/repos. As I talked about earlier in the process when first setting things up, I created a single repo for both client and server side. Later, I remade them using a dedicated repo for each client and server. When I created the original repo, I went and ran the commands needed to make a Next.js and Nest.js project. Once setting them up, I went to test if they functionally work. It was there where I noticed issues arising. They both technically worked, but there was trouble with ESLint because they both created their own configurations for ESLint. I worked on trying to fix the issues that they had with both of them, but then just came to the realization at that point that I needed to separate the client and server because they also had other duplicate configs for TypeScript and other items. So to avoid that headache, again, I split them. The last part of the project setup I worked on was documenting down for myself the git commit naming convention I wanted to use. I created it with the basis of a traditional one you can find online and used in many repos out there, but I added a couple different additions to it that I thought were lacking in the traditional one you could, again, find online. The other puzzle piece I started working on this week is the development of the style and identity of this project. So far in this video, I actually haven't named the project. I have actually created the name for it though. So to tell you the name, the project will be called Everway, the general meaning being a constantly unfolding journey. Once figuring that out, I then went to try and find a good font for the title as well as just the general text of the site. That is where I kind of got carried away and spent a little bit too much time trying to find a font. So far, I've just created a list of possible choices that I'll be testing out. The last part I started concepting was the logo design, but again, not fully set on that yet and still needs to be much more developed. I've been just sketching out. Overall, that is what I've done so far. If you have watched to this point, I would appreciate you leaving a like, and if you want to see more, then please subscribe. Thank you for watching.